Hey, Helena.
Is that applause for me?
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah. I'm feeling very relaxed.
Good.
We spent the last hour and a bit together.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a little private.
We did.
Now, funny enough, in the private that you went through with me, or the one-to-one, I was thinking we were going to be doing la 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 la, that type of thing. But we didn't. So why didn't we?
Yeah. So there's this beautiful quote from a prominent voice teacher who's now passed away called Dudley Knight. And it's that the voice comes from an alive, alert stillness. So a lot of the work that I do with people in the beginning is really learning to listen to what is happening in the body, breathing with it, and then speaking from there. So for many people, this more invisible, the sensational self, the emotional self, that can the breath really hold it? And can you express from that? That takes a little bit of time for people to get used to, because that sense of embodied listening, I suppose, and that all, for me, communication, expression, voice work, creativity, is really about listening to how am I being affected by you? How am I being affected by my environment? And what supports that and fuels that is the breath. So how can I breathe with that? Because for many people, we shut down, we don't want to let our environment in, we don't want to let the other person in, we don't want to let the experience in. But really to become an authentic, empowered speaker, I have to train myself, practice to breathe with any of the little moments that come up. And I think a lot of the work is about that. And that's why I start in stillness, in getting you used to that sense of your environment, where you are, your nervous system, taking that in, aligning with the ease of that, which is what we worked on. So we looked around the room, we noticed what we enjoyed looking at, and then what is my felt sense in relation to that? So how do I feel about that? How do I breathe with that? And now you're ready to express. Yeah. So that alive, alert stillness is a really crucial part of speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it's almost like I was examining my external environment, and then that affected my internal environment. Whereas you mentioned something very interesting about sometimes we want people in the modern world to come into a yoga class, sit there, close their eyes and breathe. And they've just come from being in a traffic jam or on their phone trying to sort something out, or maybe in a conversation with someone. And then we're asking them to be still straight away.
Yeah.
Instead of acknowledging what is around them as opposed to what's in front of them, i.e. their phone.
Yeah.
That was really fascinating for me. When I actually first met you, to be honest, I couldn't help but be self-conscious. You came to the door of my house, and I was thinking, is she assessing my body language? Is she assessing how I'm projecting my voice? So I was like, good morning.
Yeah, you do that quite well.
I was kind of conscious about my theatrics, and were you thinking, is assessing me? Because say when I do a one-to-one with someone and I'm teaching them handstands, for example, I'll look at their body to see, to get an assessment of, are they someone who what are they capable of so far? And also I'm picking up on their, if they feel nervous, because it is quite intense when you do one-to-one.
Yeah.
So without being self-centered or like an egomaniac, what did you pick up about me?
When we first met at the door, I went straight into my curiosity about your electric car. So for me, people are their stories. People are, so we talked about your electric car, and we talked about, you going to Sligo and it only, lasting 150 kilometers. And so in that exchange, I'm getting a sense of who you are just intuitively. Yeah. I walked into your house and I met your dog, Alfie. So I'm getting a sense of who you are by the environment you live in, by how you and I communicate. And I guess assessment doesn't come into it. It's more a felt sense of what is here.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's the importance for me of what do I see, what am I listening to, how are we exchanging, what's happening in that exchange, and that takes time. Yeah, so I just allow that time for that to evolve, and I very much work with just what's here in front of me in the present moment, and that's how I experience you. I experience you in relation to what's on offer. I'm not listening to where your voice is, or when we went into the one-to-one, of course, I'm watching your body language, because now my attention is on, well, what's happening in your body? What is the thing that's most organizing? How can we allow you become much more aware of what you're already doing? So in many ways, the work that I do is really to be with the person where they are and to make them aware of what's already powerful about what they're doing. Because for me, much of the work is people are so unconscious about what's already there. And that can we bring attention to what's already there that's really working for you? And then can we expand on that and make that become something more conscious? Really going from the unconscious to the conscious, in a sense. So, my impression was someone who's very aware of the environment, has their electric car, is a self-starter, because so we had that whole conversation. Oh, self-starters, they get all the new innovations, but they're not quite established yet. Whereas if they waited about 10 years, you'd get the better, design.
I don't think things through. I did I think it's the Herman Myers brain test.
Oh, yeah.
Herman Myers brain
Briggs.
Briggs. Yeah, Herman Briggs assessment.
Yeah.
That thing.
Yeah.
And I did that in the last company I worked for, which was an artificial intelligence company. And all the people there were engineers. And I was in operations. And when they came and did the assessment, it was like very thoroughly done. One of the things that they said on my chart was completely different to everyone else's. And it was, you like to start things, but without thinking them through. And I've always been that way. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's give it a go. See what happens. But that can have its downsides. But I think, so it's interesting what you were saying about being like the electric car. I bought the car and didn't think about traveling cross country, for example, which now I might have to do quite a lot. But also you talked about movement and how you mentioned something about being what you said to me about my rocking.
Yeah, so that when I'm with a client or an actor, or I'm watching the body language, because for many people what their voice is doing and what their body is doing can be quite disconnected, because we see in the body the rigidity, the fight, flight, freeze patterns that kick in when we feel intimidated, self-conscious, which is often when we get to stand up in front of a class or stand up to present, or it could happen to us on a film set or in a rehearsal process. So I'm watching the body, and the natural physiology and biology is that our bodies want to organize. They want to feel safe and secure. And we spoke about this, that the first thing I'm interested in doing is creating that environment where you feel safe and secure in a really concrete, authentic way in your body.
Yeah. And
how do we do that? Well, we notice what's already happening. And you were doing kind of a certain amount of rocking was happening from side to side. And so your energy was trying to find its place, inside this moment. So I asked you to move with that, because often, especially young boys are told that, sit still, don't move, stop fidgeting. When in fact, that's just our body needing to do something with the excess energy. And what we did was go, well, okay, you're moving. Let's just notice what feels good about that movement. And what was interesting through the session was the more you allowed yourself kind of just be with that, notice what feels good, you eventually came to a stillness. And then I asked you, where's the stillest part of where you are? And you were really, really still. And then we went into this work with imagery and emotion and meaning and sensation. So, and that's where you had this alive, alert stillness that I talk about, that really you're coming, like whether you're on screen or you're about to speak, what we want to do is strategically use our attention into alignment with our environment, what feels good inside. So we're super focused while still having this really alive energy flow moving through us, so we can have nuance and range and color and expression in our voices. So like even now you're rocking forward and back, and that's completely, that's just the body, self-soothing and kind of going, oh, okay, what feels good about that? Because eventually what will happen is, especially when I'm working with, my actors on camera, where they're told, be still, which is them going, So if you're really, really still, the nervous system has sent the instruction, we're in danger here, do not move. So we stop breathing, the whole mechanism breaks down. Whereas it's different when stillness comes from within, from a sense of ease and a sense of really sharp focus. Because a lot of, as you would have seen this morning, the skills they're very simple. They're very simple, but it's the practice of them, like yoga. It's the repetition of them that really feeds the system. This environment's safe. Oh, it's safe to breathe. Oh, it's safe to express. Because if I'm nervous or I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, one of the first things that's going to go, one is my sight. I can't see my environment, right? And then the second thing is I'm not going to speak. Or I'm going to push my voice and I'm going to project. And then the audience are scared because you're not speaking to them. Yeah. So this micro movements are really interesting to start to become aware of, instead of I shouldn't be doing that. It's okay. What feels good about that?
It's funny because when I come into class, I get down on my mat, I kneel down. This is my ritual, and I often catch myself rocking, and then I think, can people see me rocking? Do they think I'm a bit mad? But so I'll stop and notice I've been rocking. But now it's good to know that, because actually when I was about 6, I was put into a special needs class because I was considered to be, I suppose, have special needs maybe. And I had like the speak and spell, and I had to do lines and this type of thing. And it was mainly because I couldn't stop moving. I couldn't. And I was, so that's interesting that it's just my body, as you said, trying to manage that energy.
Completely.
Yeah. And if you don't manage that energy, say, as you said to people, if you say, watch what you do with your hands, maybe you have them by your side, what happens then? Do people just look unnatural and feel unnatural?
Yeah, so you'll see it, like, when you watch people speak, often what happens is the arms are down by the side and they're speaking like this, and and you can't understand them. You're having to really focus on, because there's no body connected with it, or the body's doing stuff that has nothing to do with the expression.
That's so funny you say that, because you can see it's so blatantly obvious when a politician's been trained. Like, look at Mark Zuckerberg, for example, how he's clearly been trained to use his hands, and it doesn't match with his voice or with his facial expressions. That's why
it's a lie detector. You see, it's a complete lie detector. The human voice and the body, it just completely gives you away.
That's why Zuckerberg gets accused of being an alien or a robot, because because there's loads of memes about him being a robot that's been trained to be like a human. Obviously it's a joke, because we look at that, and to the human eye, something's not right. We can't put our finger on it. He's making the right gestures, he's saying the right things, but it just doesn't fit, because, and he obviously has the best guys in the world training him, but it's do with
the intention, you see. Where is his intention? And that's the interesting thing, the speakers that really move us and shift us and change us, and in their presence when they speak, we transform. There's an intention of integrity, if that's what we're looking for, inside and behind the words that they use. So there's the words, and then, as we spoke about the iceberg, there is this extraordinary depth beneath from which the words come. And that's why in voice work we really listen to, well, what is happening in the body? What are the sensations saying? What are the emotions speaking? And then can I breathe with that, and can I speak from there? Whereas I can very easily politically, manufacture a certain way of speaking and saying, but there's a lie detector. Like the human voice is a lie detector. I had this very funny moment with my daughter once. We were in the car, and I got annoyed about something, and then she said, I'm sorry, Mama. And I said, okay. She goes, no. I went, what? No, your tone of voice told me it's not okay. So there's this sense of our intonation creates war or peace, in a sense. So if the intention isn't clear, or we'll feel that in the voice. So often we're reacting to someone's tone of voice as opposed to the words that they use, for what feels good or what doesn't feel so good.
Yeah. I think intention is interesting because maybe a politician, for example, their intention is to influence people for their own gain, as it were. And they're being trained to do certain actions, but it's almost like they're not peeling it back to simple things like you were saying about what's their environment like and how does it affect them. So because what we were doing downstairs, as you mentioned, was, so there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about actually, was the organic intelligence. Now I'll explain what I experienced. So we were sitting down, and I was asked to find something I was asked to find something in the room. Just look around the room, find something and focus on something, and then asked to think of or consider the texture, the colour and the shape of that object I was looking at, and then how it makes me feel. Can I find pleasure in that, or does it make me feel okay? And then to do that, take a moment on that, do it, then look at another somewhere else in the room and a third place, and then to close my eyes and visualise that. And what I realised was, and after I'd visualised it, was then to give my feedback as to how it makes me feel, and then how that affects my breathing, as opposed to sit in a room, not know what's going on around you, and try to cultivate a breath, an arbitrary breath. For example, in yoga, we would do a box breathing, in for 4, hold it, out for 4 seconds, that type of thing, which is fine, but it's not your natural breath, is it? It's just an arbitrary number. It's better than nothing, but at the same time, you're not finding that natural rhythm that makes you maybe feel at ease. So you've done it the opposite. You've done, look at the external environment, be aware of it. How does it make you feel? And then how does that affect your breath? Is that a fair reflection?
Yeah, beautiful. It's beautifully said. I couldn't have said it better. So it's really interesting listening to that, that reflection. In that sense, first I have the experience, and then I embody that experience by noticing, how does that feel? How does my breath carry that? And then I speak from experience. Like that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in someone really speaking from experience. You've described that beautifully. I'm having my response internally to that. I'm breathing with that. I'm having kind of, an inspiration in relation to that, and then I'm speaking out of that. So that sense of orienting through to really seeing something or really listening to someone, and allowing yourself to breathe as you're listening to someone, and allowing yourself to see the environment, then notice how that makes you feel, and then breathe from there, and then speak.
Because then as well, when you do that, it becomes more of a two-way process. You'll be able to consider your environment and then react to it. So the way I was looking at that plant is now how I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
Whereas if I come into a room and I say, right, these are my breathing techniques, this is what I'm going to do, this is my maybe some bioenergetics that I'm going to do, and I don't consider things around me, I imagine speaking to people, it becomes like a one-way thing. I'm just talking at you,
nice.
And I'm not actually seeing you as a person, how that feedback loop of how is this sitting with you? Is it sitting well? Do I need to change or alter what I'm saying or how I'm saying it in real time so that it has more impact, which is very interesting, because I think that I went to a speaker school with Jerry Duffy a couple months ago, and he was talking about how public speaking is a bit of a dialogue, but it's not. They don't speak back. You're just noticing them as part of your environment. When we did so we did the organic intelligence, and then we did the Fitzmorris technique.
Fitzmaurice Voicework technique.
Oh, Fitzmaurice Voicework technique.
Yeah.
Is that what we were doing with the tremors? So if for people who are yogis, we lay down in Supta Baddha Konasana, soles of the feet together, knees open. And then once we were laying, I lay down.
I didn't.
You didn't. Yeah. And then once I lay down, my knees were open, so I was there in a passive supta, as it were, Baddha Konasana, and then I started to take the knees not fully together but halfway and hold it there, and I began to tremor, to shake, which was actually quite difficult because I've just never done that before. Is that the Fitzmorris technique? Okay.
Yeah. So basically, Catherine Fitzmaurice, who this extraordinary work came from. She studied bioenergetics for years, and she'd also studied in more traditional approaches to voice. But she is a very curious human being and has a very brilliant mind-body genius in a way. And she started to question. Her actors seemed to, no matter how much they did the traditional voice work, they still appeared to be tensioned deep in the vocal tract. And I would have felt that myself until I came to her work, and I had been teaching voice for a very long time. And she went away and studied bioenergetics, and within the bioenergetics, she went deeper into the unconscious, and she went into the autonomic nervous system. Not just the central nervous system. And within the autonomic nervous system, she began to work with these different postures, which you could call modified yoga postures. Like she had studied yoga for 10 years, went, no, we need something else when it comes to the voice. And because with the voice, she talks about freedom and focus, chaos and structure. You want both those things alive. Like you said, I'm breathing with the experience. The length of the breath really changes like a jazz-like piece of music all of the time, depending on the experience I'm having. So you want a flexibility of breath. Yeah, it's not about I breathe in, I speak, because then you get like monotone. The delivery is just flat because you're not really bringing in that liveliness. So within the bioenergetics, what she has are about 12 different postures that work at different parts of the body, all the way from the pelvis up to the crown of the head. And you're releasing any hold or tightness through really gently massaging through tremor. This is a voluntary tremor that we're creating. It's the Golgi reflex. So that it's between fully extended and fully closed, there's a moment where the body starts to shake in order to, almost like a healing response. Yeah. And what she did was explore connecting the breath to that. And she talks about this fluffy breath of the in and the out breath.
Yeah.
So you get that in many ways you're being breathed by your body.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, for me, I always felt like it was like pouring the breath, like a glass, like champagne into a glass. The breath was being poured into the tremor, and there was this relationship happening where you were breathing life into the different parts of the body that had become held and tight for very real reasons of protection, but that for the vocal instrument and for, in particular, actors, they need to have a flexible instrument where they can move and go and be emotionally and sensually available and to be able to speak from very complex places.
Did you say sensually or sensually available?
Sensually.
Available.
Yeah. So the sensational self is really, really crucial in this, because like we talk about orientation through the senses. What do I hear? What do I see? What do I feel? What do I touch? Like we know that in a lot of mysticism and for instance, Buddhism, that sense of orientation through the senses gives you a feeling of gravity, which we talk about in organic intelligence, and it's really grounding. And it brings the body into a stillness and an alignment. And then from there I can allow, like I worked with you, we worked with image. I can allow image flow through those senses. I can allow sensation. Maybe I feel fuzzy, buzzy, maybe there's a warmth moving through me or a coldness. So that starts to have a language in a sense. So what Catherine did with this work was she just was bringing the unconscious self into a more conscious felt experience. And not only that, was the knock-on effect was its creative impulse. So you become much more available to your creative impulses. So instead of working off the secondary source, you're working off that primary creative impulse, which you need to do, as any creative artist needs to do. And that there you're deeply in the unknown, and you're in discovery, and you're discovering stuff, and where did that come from? Yeah. So it's not coming from an intellectualization or a conceptual sense of the moment. It's coming from a real unknown felt sense that in a bizarre way is you go, wow. And then you find the meaning. So these bioenergetics really brings greater flexibility into the instrument. And with her work, what I find is that whether you work with it with presentations, or you work with it with song, or you work with it with text, the person themselves feels, this is my voice. These feel like my words, because you've let go of this real deep tension deep inside you around the transversus, which is the third core muscle there, your transversus, your obliques, your rectus. So the transversus which is another part of Catherine's work, she has destructuring and restructuring. So the destructuring is the tremors that I introduced you this morning, and then the restructuring is where, because the body is now open and more free, the ribs move more easily, and you've more access to your transverse.
So opening up my knees like that and practicing the Golgi reflex is a way to, it affects the transverse abdominis as well.
Exactly. So as we know, the transverse sends an impulse through the phrenic nerve to the diaphragm, and then the diaphragm works the ribs. So she talks about the transversus as being the thinking muscle. So looking at, this is the physical action of thought. And that the idea is that transversus has the malleability and flexibility to move with your experience of the environment, of the other person, of the group of people you're in the room with. And that's what gives you the structure, the stability, the feeling of strength and power, that you can really communicate something very vulnerable and authentic. And I mean, her work, I know I'll be doing it forever, and the more I practice it and the more I'm inside that work, the principles of that work, the deeper and more complex the instrument becomes. So it's a mandala, really.
I love that. The flexibility of the instrument, i.e. your voice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I did a Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know who that is?
No.
He's an astrophysicist, and he's become, we don't know many astrophysicists in the world, but he's the most famous by far. And part of the reason is he's an exceptional speaker. And I played a video to the teacher trainees last year, showing him a little 3-minute clip of him speaking, and the flexibility of his voice is incredible. He's got a baritone, Barry White style voice, but yet he can go really high pitch. He pauses, he whispers, changes his intonation, and he does all of that like effortlessly. And it's so much more engaging than someone who just is thinking, right, this is how a confident person speaks, and everything is the same all the time. Because as you said, it's very difficult then to focus on that person. It becomes, if they're like stiff and loud, that may seem like, that's good speaking because I'm not fidgeting and I'm booming my voice out there, but you become like a loud robot.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. So, because like when I hear a speaker, I want to feel who they are when they speak. So I want to resonate in my body with what it is. What is it? What's the intention? I want to feel the intention behind your words. And can I receive that? Yeah.
Why do people hate the sound of their own voice?
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the first things when people start to work with their voice is you don't discover your voice by listening to it. You discover your voice by what it feels like to express. And I think often why people, I'm sure there's 101 million ways. Sometimes people, it's when they hear themselves back on radio or recordings. And it's very different because how I hear my voice in my head, because I'm surrounded by bone and cartilage, is very different to how you hear my voice. So I think it can then be a bit of a surprise when people hear their voices back. And that this becomes really acute in singing. People have a very vulnerable relationship with their singing voices. Because our voices are they're like, Daniel Day-Lewis has this wonderful quote where he talks about the voice being the most intimate part of the self. So you really are, like when you're listening to your own voice, it's you. And it's all of you. It's not just what you physically look like. It's what you internally are resonating with as well. So I think that it's a very complex relationship a lot of us have with our voices. And interestingly, when we really empower it, it can change our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, life is about relationships. Relationships are about communication. Communication is about talking and listening. So it's incredibly important. And I think that it's funny how I was very self-conscious about what I look like when I first started on the social media, and that's why part of the reason why I didn't video these podcasts for ages. I was just conscious about what I look like. And the more I see myself now, the more I'm like, oh, that's me again, no big deal. Oh, that's what I look like from the side. That's what I look like when I've got a double chin. That's what my wrinkles look like. And I'm so used to seeing myself now, I don't even think about it. I just go post a picture of me or a clip of me, and it's no big deal. It's almost like it's an extracted icon of who I am. That isn't really, it's just a representation of who I am. And I don't have any self-consciousness about it now like I did. And thank God, because it was crippling for me. So do you think it might be a way for people to, I mean, I know it's not, it's a bit of maybe an easy fix, but to record themselves and listen to themselves back? Does that work?
Maybe someone else, many people have different responses to that. I guess for me, the voice is a felt experience. Recording yourself and listening to yourself back, I don't know. It's not the discovery that I'm looking for with people. It's more, it's a little bit like when an actor goes on set and they're filming a scene and you're in the moment of that scene and you come out and you kind of go, I don't know whether that was any good or not. I was just there.
Yeah.
So I wish for that same experience with the voice, is that when the voice is really alive, you're speaking and you're discovering things and you're kind of surprised by what's coming out of your mouth. When you're in communication, like we were saying, that any dialogue we want to be discovering and exploring, and when it's not just about opinion and I'm right and you're wrong, or I've got knowledge that I want to impart onto you, no, it's actually about can we have a reflective discussion about what we did this morning. So that sense of the human voice for me is a very present, alive process. It's already gone if you've recorded it. And listening to it back, I'm sure there's plenty of people who will say I'm sure there's benefits, but for me, I'm more interested in you really experiencing something as you speak. And then we can look back and go, how did that go? Oh, well, I felt this, and this, and then we can look at it. Yeah, but not necessarily by listening back.
Yeah, because there's ways where I would have thought that might have been a technique, but I can see how it's not experiential. You just listen to, I can see how that may not necessarily work. You have to go through the process of actually speaking itself, maybe, and
Yeah.
sharpening your tool. One thing I do a lot is I do a lot of visualization. So I did a brief period of my life boxing, and in boxing, one of the things they do is the Muhammad Ali picture up,
and the Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. I'm not a tough guy, but I do like.
Go on, you are.
No, that's all. I do like. This is a kind of separate topic, but there's something I really admire about fighters or people that are solo athletes. They've got no team around them and they're doing it all on their own. But with fighting, it's when you try it once, even at an amateur level, it's so terrifying. You're tapping into something quite primitive, and if you can get over that, or you can manage those nerves, it's I don't know. I think you can do a lot in your life. But sorry, that's a different topic. But what I was saying about boxing, if you look at boxers training, if they're doing their sparring, they'll often walk around the ring, they'll cover every part of the ring, and after they finish their sparring, they'll put the arms in the air, as if they're mimicking what they would do if they won the fight. Okay. And the same thing at the start of a fight, if you look at a boxing match, boxers will come in, they'll get into the ring, and their name will be called out, and they put their arms in the air. They're almost train themselves for not how they feel before the event, but how they're going to feel after the event when they win. And that's and I there was an Olympics recently, and one of the reporters asked the athletes, do you feel nervous? That was like the most common question, do you feel nervous? And the athlete's response would always be, no, I feel excited. So one, visualization is so important, but two is how we frame things, I find. So what I will do is I'll sit down on the mat, I'll probably start rocking, but I'm visualizing what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. And I don't think too much about my body language, but I think I'm definitely going to be using your techniques, because I want to be more conscious that is the person at the back of the room receiving what I'm saying as well as the person at the front of the room in front of me. Am I addressing, not just by projecting my voice, but can I establish some sort of intimacy with everyone? And how I do that now, I feel, is going to be by being aware of the whole environment, as you said, the global
body.
The global body, yeah. Which I know is just your body itself, but
but there's an external global body.
Yeah.
So we have this architecture of self, which is our own, which is the anchor. So just to explain, we did a certain amount of visualization this morning, where body scans really, and we connected body scans to sensation. What feels good about that? And then we noticed, how does that affect our breathing? So we use that internal work as the anchor, so that then when I open my eyes, I'm then recognizing my environment, so that if I want my voice to travel through an entire space, I need to be able to map that space in my brain.
Yeah.
So that's why we did the work of, you looked at different objects and you notice what feels good about them, and then you close your eyes and you notice those objects again, because the internal eye and the external eye, the nervous system doesn't know any different. So whether I see the plant here and notice the colors and textures, and then I notice how it feels, or I close my eyes and I imagine the colors, textures, and shape, and then feel, my nervous system thinks that's the exact same thing, which is the power of visualization. Yeah. So that sense of being able to be in the here and now and map my space and map myself in this space really hugely affects the distance at which my voice will be willing to travel. Like, that is not just about projection. Yeah, that's actually about really anchoring into your body, really being able to breathe with ease, really having a sense of, working the supports to support. Because before you start, a class, really being here and present is the best kind of skill you can use for the voice to emerge. Yeah, because it's creating ease in the body, and it's creating, you're safe. Yeah. And actually, this is a really easy place just to express, because you've been teaching this work, and then also something more spontaneous can start to arrive as well, because you know your script. Yeah. And then it's, okay, how can I be here with my script, with this new group of people, and adjust it according to their needs?
Yeah, it's funny because I have tried to teach some bioenergetics before,
like tremoring?
No, more like bouncing on the spot and stuff I've seen online.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, that excites the body,
Yeah.
right? Which is fine. But actually, what I feel, and maybe this might be for me, is just more as an individual, but it's better to have almost like a relaxed energy. So coming from a place where you are calm, and then but you still have that energy in you to deliver it, as opposed to, I'm excited, this is the class I'm going to teach, and you've done some jumping jacks beforehand, which I have done in the past, but I find that I don't need that really. That might overwhelm people. I become too excited, and because I already have all that energy already.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's nerves, but it's probably excitement. That I haven't been able to, I could channel better.
It just needs an anchor. And I think you're right in that different teachers need different approaches. Some teacher may not have the access to, to the rockings going, but might not have access to that energy. So they may need to do a different kind of start. But as long as whatever it is anchored, it has an anchor in the body. Yeah, like we looked a lot at what feels stable. So right now as you're sitting, what part of your body feels supported. So for me, I have one foot on the floor, and then I have my ass on the chair, and I can feel my lower back on the back of the chair. So if I really notice that and allow that to support me, it changes my voice. Yeah. So, and notice what feels good about that. Oh, okay, there's my support. There's my ease. So yeah, that sense of being aware of what already is, where are the resources? And we talked about this like in organic intelligence, which is a system. I probably should talk a little bit into that. It's a human empowerment and resilience training that I'm doing in Switzerland, and I'm in my third year now. But part of it is the work is to do with working with trauma, anxiety, and PTSD. And it works with the natural, organic expression of the physiology and biology of the body. So the body always wants to organize itself. Yeah, and if you really look at it, you'll find, like when someone's speaking, there'll be repetitive movements that they'll make. Okay, that's the most organizing one. Okay, what feels good about that? And that's where we're talking. Okay, now the speaker, the words, and the body are beginning to integrate, because we talk about that the physiology and biology is like a climate in the body, so that we all have a fixed climate, like Ireland. Well, with climate change, it's hard to tell what kind of climate we have, but traditionally, let's say Ireland has a particular climate that's wet or damp and breezy and mild summers, and that's its climate. So do we as human beings. We have a particular climate because of our environment, because of our epigenetics, because of how we've responded to the world. And all we're doing is, what happens to some people in their lives is they have an experience that changes that climate. And that climate becomes fixed because they've needed to protect in order to stay safe. So when we're working with organic intelligence, we're just trying to shift that climate so that it becomes more balanced and not fixed in the past. And how we're doing that is by bringing the system, the physiology and biology, into the present moment through orientation, through the senses. So we're not even going initially into the story of what happened, but more, let's try and bring your system into the here and now, not into a past memory of, oh my God, I stood up in class when I was 8 years old and I was shamed by the teacher, which can come up when all of a sudden you have to stand up and, okay, let's teach your system that you're no longer 7 years old and that you can see the camera over there and it's black and you can feel something inside. So you're now beginning to reorganize the system, to let go of the past, come into the present, and be able to evolve. So there's an evolutionary process. And And so what then? There's the sense of, what am I doing with my images? What am I doing with my sensation? What am I doing with my emotion? What's moving through this system? Yeah, and that we can talk about that there's a particular climate, and then my emotion can be the weather. So I might constantly be fixed in anger or constantly cry. And now that's a fixed state. So we want to go, can we shift that a bit? Can we? So we might move into something that's to do with, okay, there's a anger in the body. So what is that in sensation? Well, it's a heat. Okay, where do you feel the heat? Oh, I might feel it in my chest. Okay, what feels good in your body right now? Oh, I feel the support of the chair. So we're now reorganizing our relationship with the anger so that it can soften a little and not become
with the anger.
Yeah, with the anger. So, so that it doesn't become the fixed response. Okay, now I can actually maybe over time have something that's not just always angry. So there's so much to this idea of coming back to the present moment through the senses, to be able to breathe with, evolve, speak from there, and change. And that's what we're working with organic intelligence. Yeah.
I think, as you mentioned, we sometimes define ourselves by past experiences, and we forget that we are organic beings and we can change. But it requires, as you mentioned downstairs, principles, not necessarily practices. Like, what are your principal techniques? I'm conscious. I want to ask the questions that people sent in, because it's not just about me, what I want to know.
Good for him.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Yeah. So let me go to the stories. No, I go to my archive. How do I do that? Go to my archive.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm not very... here we go. Archive, boom. Now, Helena. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
What exercises can you do to become more articulate or better at pronunciation?
Okay, so a really quick one is to take poetry or a novel that you're reading and read it aloud. 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. And just feel the muscularity of the language as you speak the language, so that you're getting used to using language that's been really beautifully written, and your mouth is getting used to putting the muscles around that. So that's a very quick exercise that you can do to just for that sense of clarity.
Would it help to look in the mirror?
No.
Okay.
Because it's a physical, so articulation is a physical action of the lips and the tongue. And what you want to do is feel the physicality of your mouth moving, because often the reason why there might not be some is because the lips aren't moving and the tongue isn't moving. So one way of doing it is take really, really heightened text, like whether that be poetry or a novel, and start to read, so you can start to really get your mouth around the language.
Would A-E-I-O-U, that thing, help? Sorry, I don't mean to like...
You could do tongue twisters, look them up online. I mean, I did do a whole thing where we work all the different muscles. It's just like your body, you've got so many muscles in your face. So you stretching your face and moving your lips from side to side. And if you look up tongue exercises or lip exercises or facial exercises on the internet, I'm sure there's loads of them, and tongue twisters. They can really, really help in for greater clarity.
You do accent training as well.
Yeah.
And someone said to me recently is that I speak better when I'm teaching class than I do in real life. That I get a bit posher, basically. And I've lived in Ireland half my life, and my accent is pretty much the same as when I lived in London. But I'm just wondering, is that still being authentic?
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I mean, of course you're going to speak differently when you're teaching, because you are communicating to a group of people. I'm
trying to enunciate everything.
Yeah, and you want to be clear. And then when you're in your life, you're just shooting the breeze. It's it's not the same thing. So rhythmically, it's very different. It's probably much faster.
And in fact, my accent stays the same, but it can occasionally get a bit working class if I'm trying to be funny, for example.
Great.
Because I think I just was subconscious about it, thinking like, well, my accent's actually changing. My social status is changing during the class.
Yeah.
But no, it's just.
But of course, you're going to want to clarity of intention when you're speaking to a group of people is really important, because you could have an international audience. You could have people from all over the world in your classes. So all of us have to change the rhythm then. Like within, we're going to change how we express or communicate as a result.
It's so funny you say that, because like I've been with people when a foreign person or non-native English speaker has asked a question and they're just like, yeah, just down there, mate. I'm like, you have to say yes, you have to articulate it properly, and some people are just not aware of that maybe. Yeah. But then you'll get other people who, when they're speaking to a French person, they'll put on a French accent.
Yeah.
It's like, you're taking it too far.
Yeah, that's funny.
That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, another second question. Tips for dealing with involuntary responses like shaky voice, throat, or dry throat.
Yeah, so just dry throat. Yeah, so these are all nervous responses. So one very simple one can be, before you get up to speak or you stand up to teach, you just notice what is supporting you. So for instance, say you're sitting, so what part of if you're sitting, then the floor is supporting your hips. Mm-hmm. You just really notice that, so that you're sending the impulse to your nervous system, everything is safe and secure. Because the only reason that tremor, that shake comes in, or the shaky voice, is because the nervous system doesn't feel stable and it doesn't feel strong. So one of the best ways to do that is to bring your attention to your bones. So I feel my hips or my ass on the floor just before I start to speak, and I feel, well, what feels strong in my body? Maybe it's my spine, maybe it's the way my hands are on my legs. So you begin to notice your body, because that is your greatest anchor, and that changes your breathing. And now you're not just unconsciously speaking and speaking from a place of nervousness or where the voice starts to shake. You're going, oh, I have my entire body. My brain is receiving the signal. Oh, my entire body is behind me. A quick body scan is a brilliant thing to do, as long as you connect it to your breathing. I'm noticing the space between my toes and my ankles, noticing what feels good about that. I'm breathing with that between my ankles and my knees, so that your brain realizes, oh, okay, I've got all of this here. So I talk to people about that when you're speaking with an audience, 10% of your attention is on yourself and 90% is on the audience. So the 10% on yourself is, can I feel the floor beneath my feet? And what feels good about that? Can I feel the chair? And can I feel the chair supporting my hips? Yeah. And then where you can go from there is, now you're anchored, and now I can focus outward to my audience or to my class, and I can express. If I'm with another person and I'm just communicating and it's you and I, 50% of my attention might be on myself, 50 on you. So a lot of the time we feel, and this is where it can be tricky, my listening must be 100% on the other person, or it must be 100% on my class. And if it is, very hard for you to ground, because none of your attention is on yourself. Okay? So for instance, if I say this in relation to camera, 90% of my actors' attention is on what's going on in their experience, 10% is on the film set. If we're going out to perform on stage, 10% is on me, 90%. So energetically, it's quite different. So in that question, I would say that all I would ask that teacher to do is just add the 10% of awareness of your own body before you start to speak, because all that's happening is, and the dryness, just make sure you're well hydrated, but you can also get dryness even if you are well hydrated, because it's just a nervous response. So just make sure that 10% of your awareness, you've practiced that it's that you're in the equation as you speak, because it's your body is there doing the work to support you to speak. So there needs to be an awareness of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. Last question. I've done my yoga teacher training, but I would like to. I'd like to be a yoga teacher, but I'm naturally very shy. What advice would you give me?
I think, first of all, that it's interesting, that sense of how can you make that shyness that you have a gift, and that to trust that there's a stillness maybe that you have, and a silence and an ability to listen that you have that maybe other teachers don't. So I would say, first of all, trust that sense you have of yourself, and give yourself the time before you stand up to speak that you need to prepare yourself to be able to do that. So what self-care do you need to do in order to feel okay in front of this group of people? Because often when we have a more introverted energy, we can feel the external world in a much more heightened way. So it means that we really need to feel quite safe and secure in order to be able to speak. So whatever strategies you have, like there's a lot of what we've spoken about in this podcast, like the orientation outward, noticing something in your environment that you enjoy looking at, then noticing what feels good inside. That simple exercise can really help if you're shy, because what we're doing is, again, feeding your system. It's okay, everything's safe here. Yeah, again, all those grounding exercises that I just mentioned, where we get nervous, where you notice what in my body feels strong right now, so that you're supporting who you are and who you are as a teacher. Because I think that's, the most exciting teachers are just 100% themselves. And I know that one of the greatest compliments I can get is, you're so yourself in the class that it's easy for me to be myself. So there's something about that shyness that I would bring to the floor as something that's part of who you are, and moving from there in a way.
That's so good.
Yeah.
How can your shyness be your gift?
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
It's a gift to the rest of us, so because the rest of us talk too much.
With that, Helena, that was phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
I am attending your workshop on June 15th.
That's right.
Which is Clarity of Voice.
That's right.
And my voice is going to be very clear by the end
there
of it.
There we go. Yeah, so that will bring you into the mouth and all of the clarity and articulation work. Yeah.
Because I am really fascinated by this. As I mentioned downstairs, I love doing what I'm doing, and the main reason is because I get to work with people, and I've understand how important it is to develop your voice. So you've been phenomenal, and I hope you'll come on again sometime.
Absolutely, I will.
Thank you.
It's a joy. Thank you.